Snow fell in sheets so dense it blurred the horizon into a white void, the kind of storm that swallowed sound and reason alike. Yet through that suffocating quiet came the low, rhythmic grind of metal over frozen mud as the Sherman Firefly pushed forward, its tread screaming against the ice. Inside, the air was thick with diesel and human breath, every exhale rising like smoke from an unseen fire. Sergeant Elias Warren sat behind the periscope, gloved fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the focus, catching glimpses of gray shapes moving beyond the veil of snow. He could feel the vibration of the engine deep in his ribs, like a pulse that did not belong to any living thing. The radio crackled, distant voices shouting commands from a command post miles away, distorted by interference and fear. "Hold position and await confirmation," said the voice, clipped and cold, as if spoken by a man who had never seen frost burn a face or felt the earth shudder beneath artillery. Warren looked down at his crew, Miller the gunner, barely 22 and chewing on a piece of frozen gum, Kearns the loader, muttering under his breath a prayer half-remembered, and Beck the driver, his hands locked on the control sticks, jaw clenched tight. The tank was their coffin and their shelter both, steel walls creaking with the temperature drop. Warren lifted his binoculars and stared into the white, trying to find movement, but all he saw were flakes tumbling endlessly, a sky that had forgotten direction. Somewhere ahead, an infantry column was pinned down by enemy armor, the kind that moved fast and struck without sound until it was too late. Warren could feel it, something out there, a rhythm of motion he couldn't yet see, but his instincts whispered that they weren't facing forward at all. He tapped the periscope, eyes narrowing. "They're not coming head-on," he muttered. "They're circling." Miller looked up from the gun sights, puzzled. "Command says East Ridge, sir. That's where the ambush hit." "Command's blind," Warren replied quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The storm was masking sound and heat both, and in that kind of weather, the rules didn't apply. You survived by intuition, not by radio signals written miles from the front. A sudden thud rocked the tank, a distant explosion, muffled but close enough to shake snow from the turret roof. The ground trembled, and for a moment the white curtain outside glowed orange from unseen fire. "That's closer," Beck said. "Too damn close." Warren reached for the map taped to the interior wall, its edges curling from humidity. The red pencil lines meant little now. Visibility was gone, landmarks erased by the storm. "We're not waiting," he decided. "Engine full idle. Rotate the turret 20 degrees north." Miller hesitated. "But orders?" "We'll be dead if we wait for them," Warren snapped, then softened his tone. "Trust me, Miller." The gunner obeyed, and the turret groaned as it began to turn, the barrel cutting a dark line through the snow. Warren watched through the scope again, then froze. Shadows moved along the treeline to their flank, faint outlines low and deliberate. Tank destroyers, maybe 2, maybe 3, using the storm as cover. They weren't supposed to be there, yet there they were, crawling like predators around prey too distracted to look behind. Warren's stomach knotted. He knew this feeling. He had ignored it once before, months ago in Normandy, and it had cost another platoon half their men. The guilt burned under his ribs even now, a wound that never healed. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "Miller, hold your aim steady. Loader, AP round now." "Sir, we're not cleared to fire," Kearns protested. "We could be hitting friendlies." "They're not friendlies," Warren said, his voice steady but low, the kind of calm that made men listen even when they shouldn't. The loader rammed the shell home, the metallic clank echoing through the hull like a heartbeat. The gun elevated slightly, its recoil system whining with tension. Warren leaned over the sight. The shapes were clearer now, faint but moving with purpose, their silhouettes squat and menacing. He could almost see the muzzle flashes waiting to appear. "Fire!" The cannon erupted, shaking the entire tank, the recoil slamming into his chest like a physical blow. The flash lit the snow like lightning, and through the smoke, Warren saw the first shadow vanish in an eruption of debris and flame. "Hit confirmed," Miller gasped, disbelief in his tone. "Good shot," Warren said, already scanning for the next target. "Reload." The storm howled louder, as if alive, swirling the smoke into spirals that masked the tank's position. The radio screamed again, command demanding a status update, But Warren ignored it, eyes locked through the fog, waiting for the inevitable retaliation. Then it came, a sharp crack in the distance, followed by a shell slamming into the frozen ground just yards short of their hull, showering them with dirt and snow. Beck cursed, gripping the controls tighter. "We're boxed in, sir." "No, we're not," Warren said. He could see the faint trail of exhaust through the storm, the second enemy vehicle adjusting position. "Miller, turret 3 degrees left, elevation -2. When you see the flash, don't think, fire." Another heartbeat. Another pulse. The flash came. Miller's shot followed a fraction later, perfectly timed, instinct over calculation, and the explosion rolled across the field like thunder trapped beneath the clouds. Silence followed, except for the hiss of snow melting on hot metal. Warren exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass. The radio crackled again, desperate now, shouting words he didn't care to hear. "Command wants confirmation," Kearns said hesitantly. "Tell them nothing," Warren replied. "We're still alive, that's all they need to know." He leaned back, letting the tension drain from his hands. The blizzard had quieted slightly, revealing smoldering wrecks half buried in snowdrifts, the twisted outlines of what had been German armor. He felt the faintest tremor of pride, not in victory, but in the act itself, in trusting instinct over procedure. Outside, the wind shifted, clearing the air just enough to show a line of infantry moving up from the valley below, Allied troops who would never know how close they'd come to annihilation. Warren lowered his binoculars. "They'll make it through," he murmured. Miller looked at him with awe and confusion. "How'd you know they'd be there, sir?" Warren didn't answer right away. He looked at the cracked periscope glass, at his crew's weary faces lit by the dim red glow of the dashboard lamps, and he thought of the word instinct, not as defiance, but as faith, the kind that came from scars and silence. "You don't think it," he finally said. "You feel it." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, blanketing the wrecks and erasing the evidence of what had just occurred. The world looked calm once more, but Warren knew better. Calm never lasted long in war, and when it broke again, it would be the ones who dared to turn the wrong way who kept humanity alive. The storm did not ease by morning, only shifted its shape, the snow now falling in soft, relentless curtains that seemed to swallow the sound of the world. Inside the Firefly, the men moved like ghosts, each wrapped in his own exhaustion, their faces pale beneath the grime. The radio hissed again with bursts of static and half-words, fragments of orders that meant nothing without context. Warren rubbed his temples, eyes stinging from lack of sleep, listening to the hum of the engine idling low. The crew had slept in shifts, if sleep could be called what they managed, more a kind of drifting stupor between bursts of noise. Kearns sat by the loader's hatch, tapping a pencil against an empty ration tin, a nervous rhythm that set Warren's teeth on edge. Beck coughed into his sleeve, the sound dampened by the roar of wind outside. Miller wiped the frost from the gun sight and spoke first, his voice low. "Command says the column made it through. They're calling last night a lucky break." Warren didn't look at him. "Luck doesn't hit 2 tanks in a snowstorm," he said flatly. "They don't understand what we saw." Miller hesitated. "Maybe they don't need to." Warren finally turned, his expression hard. "If they don't understand it, they'll walk right into it again." The argument faded there, but the silence that followed was thick, heavier than any reprimand could be. Outside, visibility had dropped again. The forest was little more than a wall of shifting gray, and somewhere beyond it, engines murmured, distant, uncertain, the kind of sound that could belong to friend or foe. Warren turned the periscope, sweeping the ridge, but found nothing. His gut twisted again, that familiar sense of something unseen. He reached for the map, studying the contour lines. Their position was exposed. If the Germans regrouped, the valley would become a kill zone. He needed to move them before that happened, but the latest orders demanded they hold position until new coordinates came through. That meant waiting. Waiting had killed men before. "We can't stay," Warren said. "We're blind out here." Beck looked up from the controls. "You said yourself the engine's running rough. We move, we risk a stall." "Better a stall than a shell in the side," Warren replied. Kearns stopped tapping the tin, and asked the question everyone else avoided. "What if you're wrong this time?" The words hung there, sharp as the cold air seeping through the cracks in the hatch. Warren didn't answer right away. He thought of Normandy again, of the radio order he'd obeyed that time, the one that sent them straight into a field of fire. He'd learned since then that hesitation killed as cleanly as bullets. "If I'm wrong," he said quietly, "then at least we'll go down doing something instead of waiting for it." The radio crackled again, a burst of sound followed by the clipped voice of command. "Firefly 2, confirm your status. Hold current position until further instruction. Reinforcements inbound." Warren clenched his jaw and didn't reply. The voice repeated, more insistent. Beck shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, they'll court-martial you if we move without." "They'll court-martial a corpse?" Warren snapped, then softened. "We'll reposition, not retreat. Quarter-mile north, behind that ridge line. It'll give us cover if they counterattack." The crew exchanged glances but said nothing. Orders from Warren had a gravity to them, the kind that came from someone who'd already crossed the line once and lived to tell about it. Beck revved the engine. The tank lurched forward, treads grinding against ice, every movement loud and slow. Snow sprayed from beneath the steel plates as they crawled uphill, the storm thickening around them like a living thing. Warren guided them by instinct more than sight, using memory and terrain feel, the way the ground sloped beneath them, the subtle echo of sound that changed when they neared trees. A shell crater appeared suddenly ahead, half hidden beneath snow. Beck veered just in time, the tank sliding slightly before regaining traction. They reached the ridge and halted. The view from there was bleak and endless, the valley below cloaked in fog. Smoke from burning wrecks still curled faintly in the distance where last night's fight had taken place. Warren scanned the horizon again and caught movement far to the west, tiny flashes, the telltale glint of armor glass. He exhaled slowly. "They're probing the flank," he murmured. "They'll come through that forest line before dusk." Miller adjusted his scope, trying to see. "Can't be sure at this range." "You don't need to see it to know it," Warren said. He could feel the same quiet rhythm in his chest, that strange synchronization with the battlefield he could never explain. It wasn't sight or sound, it was pattern, a map of motion that played in his head like the hum of an engine before it fails. "We'll dig in here," he ordered. "Minimal profile. Loader, check ammo. Gunner, adjust elevation for short-range engagement." The men moved without comment now, the tension between them replaced by a grim focus. The Firefly's interior filled with the sounds of preparation, metal clinks, the rustle of shell casings, the dull thud of boots on steel. Warren climbed halfway out of the hatch to look around. The wind cut into his face like glass, his breath crystallizing in the air. He could barely see 20 yards ahead, yet he felt watched, as if something in the whiteness had eyes. He ducked back inside, sealing the hatch. "We hold fire until they're close," he said. No flashes, no sound. The hours stretched thin. Afternoon came without light, the sky dimming into a bruised gray. The radio had gone silent now, either dead or abandoned. Miller sat with his hands on the traverse controls, waiting. Kearns hummed softly under his breath, a sound that wasn't quite music, more an attempt to drown the silence. Beck dozed for a few minutes, head resting against the hatch, until Warren nudged him awake. "Stay sharp," he said. "They'll move when the wind shifts." And as if the storm heard him, the wind did change, gusting from the north, tearing through the forest below. With it came faint echoes, the mechanical rhythm of approaching engines. Miller's eyes widened. "Contact," he whispered. Warren leaned into the scope. The shapes emerged slowly through the fog. 4 armored vehicles moving in staggered formation, their outlines angular and unmistakable. "Panzer IVs," Warren said. "Advance pattern. They're sweeping for survivors." Beck swallowed hard. "What now?" "We let them pass," Warren said. "Then we hit their tail." The waiting was torture. The enemy tanks rolled closer, their engines a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the Firefly's hull. Snow churned beneath their tracks, sending up white plumes that masked their movement. Warren's heart pounded with every inch they closed. He could see the cross insignia now, the glint of frost on their turrets. One wrong sound, one breath too loud, and the illusion would break. The lead tank rolled past their position, then another, until only the last trailed behind. Warren gave a silent signal. Miller pivoted the gun by degrees, lining up the shot with precision born of instinct. The air felt electric, charged with waiting. "Now!" Warren whispered. The shot ripped through the stillness, a single devastating crack that shattered the storm's hush. The shell struck true, igniting the rear vehicle in a burst of orange flame. The others panicked, turning wildly, firing blind into the trees. Warren shouted coordinates, his voice cutting through the chaos, and Miller fired again, the recoil slamming them backward. Another explosion bloomed, the valley flashing like lightning under snow. Beck pushed the tank forward slightly to a new position, the treads crushing branches and debris. The engagement lasted minutes but felt eternal. When the final echo faded, the field below was littered with wreckage, smoke rising in slow, mournful columns. Inside the Firefly, the men sat motionless, ears ringing. No one spoke. The smell of gunpowder and oil hung thick in the confined space. Warren stared through the viewport at the dying firelight flickering across the snow. "They'll report us for breaking formation," Miller said finally, his voice small. "Let them," Warren replied. He rested his hand on the cold steel beside him, feeling the tremor of the machines settling after battle. Outside, the storm had quieted again, and the first faint stars began to appear through the thinning clouds. Warren watched them in silence, the weight of what they'd done pressing heavy on his chest. He knew more would come, that defiance had a cost. But for now, in this brief pause between orders and consequence, there was only the hum of the engine and the quiet certainty that instinct had saved them once more, though it might not save them next time. The morning broke without color, a gray haze stretching over the ruined valley, where the last of the fires had gone cold. Smoke hung low, refusing to rise, trapped beneath the heavy sky. Inside the Firefly, frost had crept across the metal panels overnight, forming thin veins that shimmered faintly in the pale light. The crew moved quietly, each man bound by the same exhausted rhythm that came after surviving when they shouldn't have. Beck checked the engine again, tightening a line that hissed with steam. Miller polished the sight glass with the edge of his sleeve, his hands trembling just enough to betray the fatigue he tried to hide. Kearns rummaged through the ammunition compartment, counting what was left. 8 rounds AP, 5 he said softly. "That's all." Warren nodded, eyes on the periscope. The forest to the west was calm now, but too calm, and his instincts prickled with unease. War never left voids, something always filled them. The radio remained silent except for a low hum that felt more like a heartbeat than static. He reached out and turned the dial slowly, catching fragments of a transmission. Commands from higher up, urgent but distant. He recognized the voice of the battalion major, the same one who'd ordered them to hold ground 2 days ago. Enemy regrouping near Sector 5. Units advance on signal. All armor to face East Ridge. Warren's eyes narrowed. East Ridge. That was the wrong direction. He looked at the map again, the creased paper worn soft from use, and traced the terrain in his mind. The East Ridge was empty. They had destroyed the flanking armor there last night. The real threat would come from the opposite side, through the forest line where the Germans had vanished. He could feel it, that same faint current of motion, as if the ground itself whispered warning through the treads. "They've got it wrong again," he muttered. Miller looked up. "Orders say east." "You sure?" "I'm sure," Warren said. "They're repositioning for a counterstroke through the west corridor. If we aim east, we'll expose our back." The others exchanged uneasy glances. They all remembered what happened last time he went against orders, but they also remembered what happened when he didn't. Beck broke the silence first. "If command's wrong again, they'll hang us for insubordination." Warren adjusted the periscope, the slow turn of the mechanism echoing like a clock in the confined space. "Better to hang for defiance than burn for obedience," he said. He climbed halfway out of the hatch, scanning the ridgeline with binoculars. The air stung his eyes, the cold biting so hard it felt sharp. The forest was still a smear of gray, but between the trees, something flickered. Metal glint, brief and faint. Tracks. He ducked back inside, sealing the hatch. "They're coming," he said. "Not from the east. From behind." The tension snapped taut. Miller swung the turret handle instinctively, turning the cannon toward the rear, but Kearns grabbed his wrist. "We can't," Command said. Warren cut him off. "Command's blind." He reached for the intercom, toggling the transmitter. "Firefly 2 to Command, confirm enemy movement west of Ridge." The reply came almost instantly, sharp with irritation. "Negative contact reported west. Hold current bearing." Warren hesitated, thumb hovering over the switch. He could obey, let them turn east like ordered, and die in minutes. Or he could act now and live long enough to face the consequences. He exhaled, steady. "Acknowledged," he said into the radio, then turned it off. "Driver, rotate hull 15 degrees west. Gunner, prepare to fire on my mark." The crew obeyed in silence, their movements slower than before, not from hesitation, but from the weight of understanding that they were crossing a line again. The tank's treads ground softly as Beck shifted their position, the hull tilting slightly as it settled into a shallow depression. Through the periscope, Warren could see the shapes emerging now. Dark forms moving low through the snowdrifts, cautious but deliberate. German armor, smaller than before, likely scouts or forward elements testing the line. He watched the lead vehicle pause, its turret sweeping, searching. It hadn't seen them yet. The Firefly's engine throbbed beneath him, a restrained heartbeat waiting for release. "Hold fire," Warren whispered. The words barely carried. Miller's finger rested against the trigger, knuckles white. The lead tank rolled forward again, followed by two more, their tracks leaving deep scars in the snow. They were flanking, exactly as he had feared. Warren drew a slow breath, feeling every sound, every vibration. Then the wind shifted, clearing the air just enough for a perfect line of sight. "Now!" The cannon roared, thunder trapped inside metal walls. The first shell struck true, tearing through the enemy's side armor and igniting it in a burst of white flame. The second tank halted, smoke pluming from its exhaust, then turned wildly, unsure where the shot had come from. Miller adjusted, fired again, and the recoil slammed through the hull, jolting Warren's teeth. The second explosion rippled through the snow like an earthquake. "They've spotted us!" Kearns shouted. Return fire came a moment later, a shell whistling overhead, close enough to rattle bolts loose. Beck reversed instinctively, throwing the tank into a shallow retreat, but the treads slipped on ice. Warren steadied his hand against the console. "Hold steady. Don't give them our flank." Another round screamed past, gouging the earth beside them, showering the Firefly with dirt and ice shards. Miller cursed under his breath. "Can't get a clear shot, too much smoke." "Use the glow," Warren said. "Aim for the light behind the haze." Miller didn't hesitate. He adjusted elevation slightly, fired once more, and through the clearing snow Warren saw the third tank erupt in orange fire. The last enemy vehicle turned to flee, but Warren knew it wouldn't matter. Their line was broken. He watched it vanish into the treeline, limping, smoke trailing. The forest swallowed the sound again, leaving only the echo of the engine and the faint ticking of cooling metal. Inside the Firefly, no one spoke. The air was thick with cordite and sweat, the kind of silence that followed disbelief. Warren stared at the periscope for a long time, his hands trembling despite his effort to keep them still. The radio crackled suddenly. "Firefly 2, report position and contact results," Command demanded, voice sharp with authority. Warren didn't answer. He could almost see the consequences forming already. Disciplinary hearings, stripped rank, accusations of insubordination. He'd disobeyed direct orders twice now. But beyond that, he thought of the infantry still marching east, unaware that their rear flank had been saved, because one man had turned the wrong way. He toggled the radio at last. "Enemy armor neutralized," he said simply. "No casualties." The voice on the other end paused, suspicious. "Confirm orientation of engagement." Warren's lips thinned. "West flank," he said. "Repeat, west." Static filled the channel for a long time before the voice returned, clipped and cold. Acknowledged. Await further instruction. The line went dead. Warren leaned back, eyes unfocused, his breath fogging the narrow cabin. Kearns finally spoke, voice hollow. "They're not going to thank you for this." "I don't need thanks," Warren said. "I just need the next order to come from someone who can see." He reached up and pushed open the hatch, letting the cold air flood in. The world outside was silent again, snow falling gently over the blackened wrecks below. The firelight flickered against his face, the orange glow soft against the gray dawn. He stayed like that for a long moment, breathing in the frozen air, knowing that for every victory earned through defiance, another storm waited ahead. The horizon was hidden behind fog, and he could almost feel the weight of what was coming, the reckoning that no instinct could outmaneuver. He lowered the hatch quietly, sealing them back inside, the hum of the machine surrounding them like a heartbeat that refused to die. The reprimand came 2 hours after the last shell fired, a cold voice through a frozen wire that carried no warmth of understanding. Warren listened to it in silence, the headset pressed against his ear, while the others sat motionless, waiting for the verdict they already feared. "Command confirms deviation from direct order," the voice said, flat and precise. "Report to forward command post for review. Maintain defensive position until relieved." The words hung in the air like frost, invisible but sharp. Warren said nothing. He placed the headset down with deliberate care, the faint click of metal against steel the only sound in the cabin. Miller exhaled slowly, breaking the quiet. "They're calling it insubordination, aren't they?" Warren nodded once, his jaw tightening. "They're calling it what they always do when they don't understand." Beck kicked at the frozen floor plate, frustration bleeding through exhaustion. "We saved the line, for God's sake. If we hadn't turned west—" "Doesn't matter," Warren said quietly. "The report will say we ignored orders. That's all they'll see." Outside, the wind howled against the armor, snow whipping in through the cracked hatch seals. Kearns leaned back against the turret wall, staring at nothing. "So what now? We sit here and wait for someone to drag us back for a court-martial." "We hold," Warren replied. "They'll come when they're ready. Until then, we stay alive." The words carried no drama, just fact, but they settled into the men like a weight. The Firefly's engine was off now, the silence inside a strange contrast to the chaos that had filled it hours before. Without the hum of machinery, every small sound became enormous. The shift of boots, the creak of metal, the faint ticking from the cooling gun barrel. Warren rubbed his palms together for warmth, though his gloves were stiff with frozen sweat. The smell of cordite lingered, mixed with oil and damp fabric. He could almost taste it in the air. Through the periscope, he watched the smoke from the destroyed tanks drift upward in thin black ribbons. Somewhere behind that haze lay the front command post, an invisible line of authority that decided who lived, who died, and who got blamed when men like him made choices that didn't fit on maps. The radio crackled again, faintly. This time the voice was softer, uncertain. "Firefly 2, confirm survival of crew. Repeat, confirm crew status." Warren hesitated before answering. "All alive," he said. "Holding position. Minimal ammunition." "Acknowledged," came the reply, then after a pause. "Orders remain unchanged. Await transport. Command requests a full written account." The transmission ended with a click. Warren stared at the dead radio for a long moment. "Written account," he muttered. "They want words on paper to explain instinct." Miller smirked bitterly. "Maybe you can draw them a picture instead." The attempt at humor fell flat. No one laughed. Beck climbed out of his seat and pushed open the hatch, letting in a blast of icy air. "Need to breathe," he muttered, hauling himself halfway out. Warren watched him, then turned back to the map spread across the side panel. He traced the lines again, his finger following the contour of the valley. Something about it still bothered him. The enemy had retreated too easily, their losses heavy but not total. It wasn't a rout, it was repositioning. He felt that same pulse in his gut again, quiet but insistent. "They'll come back," he said under his breath. Kearns looked up. "What?" They're not done. They'll regroup and hit again, maybe tonight. Miller frowned. With what? We destroyed their armor. Not all of it, Warren said. And not the ones calling the shots. He folded the map and tucked it away. Load the ready rack again. We stay prepared. Kearns sighed but obeyed, moving to reload. The clang of shells echoed through the confined space. Outside, the daylight dimmed fast, the horizon bleeding from gray into deep blue. Beck climbed back down, cheeks red from the cold. Skies clearing, he said. Temperatures dropping. If we're out here much longer, we'll freeze before anyone finds us. Warren nodded. Start the engine. Low idle. Keep it warm. The driver turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then came alive with a deep rumble. The vibration filled the hull again, a strange comfort after hours of silence. Warren adjusted his headset, listening to the background chatter of the network. Most channels were dead, but one caught his attention, a distant distress call, faint but steady. Armored convoy ambushed North Sector, the voice said, broken by static. Request immediate support. Warren checked the coordinates against their map. North Sector was less than 2 miles away. He hesitated. We're not supposed to move, Miller reminded him. I know, Warren said. But if that convoy's gone, our flank goes with it. The weight of the decision pressed on him again, the same impossible balance between obedience and reason. He stared at the frost gathering on the viewport, and thought about how thin that glass really was, 1 inch between life and nothing. Beck, he said finally, prepare to move. You sure? No, Warren replied. But I'd rather be wrong moving forward than right standing still. They rolled out slowly, the treads crunching through hard-packed snow. The sound seemed too loud in the stillness, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The moonlight cut across the terrain now, pale and unforgiving, turning every tree and wreck into a shape of suspicion. As they approached the ridge, the faint smell of burning fuel drifted through the vents. Warren saw it then, a column of smoke rising beyond the next hill, faint sparks flickering at its base. Through the scope, he caught the glint of metal wrecks, Allied insignia barely visible under soot. The convoy was gone. Bodies lay scattered along the road, half covered by snow, rifles frozen in their hands. The scene was quiet, too quiet. They're still out there, Warren whispered. Eyes open. The Firefly crept forward another few yards before a sound cracked the air. Sharp, mechanical, distant. The distinct snap of a sniper's round striking armor. Contact left. Miller shouted. Beck threw the controls to the side, turning the tank as another shot ricocheted off the turret. Can't see them, he yelled. Smoke out. Warren ordered. Kearns pulled the release, and the thick white cloud billowed around them, merging with the mist already clinging to the ground. Visibility dropped to nothing. Warren peered through the scope, searching for muzzle flash, movement, anything. Then he saw it. A flicker of orange deep in the trees, the reflection off a barrel. Target 200 meters, low ground. Fire! The cannon thundered again, the shell tearing through the fog. Silence followed, then the faint sound of something collapsing. Hit, Miller said. Warren didn't relax. There's more. They waited, eyes straining against the smoke, but no more fire came. The forest was still again. He could hear his own breathing through the headset, ragged, shallow. After a minute, he spoke. Back us up. Slowly. Beck reversed, the treads squealing softly. They stopped near the burnt convoy, the engine idling. Warren climbed halfway out of the hatch, scanning the field. The cold bit into his face again, but he ignored it. The bodies were still. The wind moved through the trees with a low moan. Behind him, the crew waited for orders that didn't come. He didn't know what to say. The radio was dead again, the link to command broken. They were alone now, suspended between defiance and duty, surrounded by silence. Warren stared at the distant ridge, the smoke curling like a signal from another world. He knew they'd call him reckless, a man who couldn't follow orders. Maybe they were right. But as he watched the faint light fade behind the trees, he also knew the truth. Without defiance, they wouldn't be here to be judged at all. He closed the hatch quietly, sealing them in again, the warmth of the engine humming beneath their feet, and the night pressing close against the steel walls like a question that had no answer yet. The engine stuttered before it caught again, coughing dark smoke into the frigid air, the sound bouncing off the empty forest around them. Warren leaned over Beck's shoulder, eyes on the instrument panel, watching the trembling needle hover just above idle. "Keep it steady," he said quietly. The driver nodded, jaw clenched, both hands gripping the control sticks tight enough to whiten his knuckles. Outside, the wreckage of the convoy still smoldered, sending thin black streams into the pale dawn sky. The world had taken on a strange silence, the kind that made every small noise too sharp. The hiss of escaping steam, the groan of cooling armor, the whisper of snow drifting down onto the hull. Miller rubbed his hands together for warmth, his breath fogging the inside of the turret. "We're not going to make it far like this," he muttered. "Fuel's low, treads damaged, engine sounds like it's dying." Warren nodded. "We'll fix what we can. There's no one else out here." He pushed the hatch open and climbed out, the cold slamming into him like a wall. His boots sank into the crusted snow, crunching softly as he moved around the tank. The left tread was cracked near the front idler wheel, the metal plate split from the stress of the terrain. It wasn't catastrophic, but it wouldn't hold long. "Kearns, get the repair kit," he called down. The loader emerged a moment later, red-faced and shivering, dragging the heavy case. They worked in silence, the sounds of metal tools clanging softly in the frozen air. The smell of fuel and oil hung around them, sharp and bitter. Warren knelt, examining the damage. "We'll need to weld a plate across this joint," he said. "Miller, hand me the torch." The gunner climbed out reluctantly, fumbling with stiff fingers. The wind bit into them, cutting through their coats. Every breath burned. Warren steadied the torch, sparks hissing into the snow. The repair was slow and brutal. The cold made the metal brittle, and the flame barely held against the wind. Kearns pressed a gloved hand against the tread to keep it aligned, wincing as the heat scorched through the fabric. "Almost there," Warren said, his voice steady though his hands shook. The moment he finished the weld, a distant boom rolled through the air, low but unmistakable. All of them froze. Another boom followed, closer this time. Beck's head popped out of the hatch. "Artillery!" Warren straightened, scanning the horizon. Smoke plumes rose beyond the ridge to the north, faint flashes glinting at their base. "They're shelling the valley," he said. "Probably finishing what they started last night." The ground shuddered again as another shell landed, closer still. "Inside," he barked. They scrambled back into the tank, slamming the hatches shut as snow and debris rained down around them. The blast wave rocked the Firefly, rattling bolts loose and knocking a tool from its hook. Beck started the engine, pushing the throttle gently. "We can't stay here," he said. "If they have the range, we're next." "Move us south," Warren ordered. "Keep the ridge between us and the guns." The tank groaned forward, the newly patched tread whining under strain. Through the periscope, Warren watched the forest pass by in gray blurs, trees swaying under shockwaves. The explosions came in a regular rhythm now, methodical but searching, as if the gunners were sweeping for survivors. Snow erupted in pillars to their rear, the concussions pounding through the hull like fists. "Faster," Warren said, his voice even though his pulse was racing. Beck pushed the throttle further. The tank slid over ice, lurching as one tread caught a buried root. Miller gripped the side of the turret, muttering under his breath. "We can't outrun artillery." "We're not outrunning it," Warren said. "We're hiding from it." He pointed to a narrow depression ahead, half buried under snow. "Down there." Beck turned the Firefly toward it, the hull tipping as they descended into the shallow ravine. The noise outside dulled, the ridge now shielding them from direct impact. They sat in the hollow, engines idling, the only sound the faint ticking of settling metal. "They'll think we're gone," Warren said. "We waited out." Minutes stretched into hours. The shelling drifted eastward, then stopped entirely. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise had been. Kearns rubbed his face with both hands. Command's probably marking us missing by now. Good, Warren said. They'll stop calling. The joke fell flat. None of them smiled. He adjusted the periscope, scanning the ridge above. The smoke had thinned, revealing the black scars where shells had struck. No movement. No voices. Only the slow sigh of wind through the trees. Beck shut the engine off, conserving what little fuel remained. The temperature dropped fast. Their breath filled the cabin in slow, ghostly clouds. Miller broke the silence after a long while. "You ever think about what happens after?" he asked softly. "After what?" Warren said without looking at him. "After this," Miller said. "When it's over. If it ever ends." Warren didn't answer. He thought of Detroit, of the sound of factory presses, of his father's voice before the draft letter came. He hadn't thought about home in weeks, maybe months. The war had a way of erasing everything except the next move, the next command to ignore or obey. He finally said, "If it ends, it ends. That's enough." Another pause settled. The air felt thicker somehow, as if the silence itself had mass. Then came a new sound. Distant engines, faint but growing. Not artillery this time. Trucks or light armor. "Someone's moving," Beck said. Warren listened, his ear against the hull. "Could be our relief," Kern said hopefully. Warren didn't share his optimism. Or it could be them sweeping the field. He reached for the binoculars and climbed halfway out of the hatch, the cold slicing through him like a blade. The horizon shimmered with heat from distant fires, but beyond that he could see shapes. Vehicles moving in a slow line across the valley floor, no flags visible. Too deliberate for retreat. Too quiet for friendly. "It's them," he said. "We stay hidden. Engines off, no movement." He dropped back inside, sealing the hatch again. The air grew still. They waited, listening to the faint rhythm of distant tracks crunching snow, moving closer, then fading again. The sound passed like a predator's shadow and was gone. Hours slipped by unnoticed after that. The light outside dimmed, and the temperature fell until frost rimed the inside walls. Warren sat with his back to the turret, eyes closed, counting the intervals between each distant sound, each gust of wind. He wasn't sure when exhaustion gave way to thought, but he found himself remembering the first time he'd been inside a tank. Training ground in England, sunlight glaring off polished armor, the instructors shouting orders about precision, angles, and trust. None of that had survived contact with war. Out here, precision was luck, orders were chains, and trust was what kept men breathing when command forgot their names. A soft knock broke the silence. Beck tapping the side panel gently. "She's holding," he said. "Patch is good. We'll move at dawn." Warren nodded. "Dawn," he repeated, more to himself than anyone. He leaned back, the vibration of the cooling engine still faintly pulsing beneath him. Outside, the last smoke from the north drifted into the stars, a thin gray trail marking the line between survival and consequence. He knew they couldn't stay hidden forever, that command would come looking, or the enemy would. But for now, in this brief stillness carved out of chaos, they had a heartbeat, a machine, and each other. It was enough to make the silence bearable, even if it was only the calm before the next storm. Dawn came slow and dim, the light filtering through a sky the color of tarnished steel, spreading weakly across the snow that now lay undisturbed over the battlefield. The Firefly sat half-buried near the ravine's edge, its hull dusted white, its exhaust frozen in jagged streaks. Warren woke first, not from rest but from habit, the kind of awareness that refused to die even when the body begged for stillness. The others stirred gradually, wordless, each moving through the motions of another day survived. Beck cranked the engine again, the low rumble echoing through the hollow, breaking the fragile quiet. The noise carried too far for Warren's liking, but he said nothing. The cold would kill them faster than the enemy if they stayed still. He climbed out through the hatch, the air biting instantly into his face, and scanned the horizon. The world was unnaturally calm, smoke trails now faint ghosts in the distance, the smell of iron and frost mingling into something that made the lungs ache. Through his binoculars he could see black shapes along the valley floor, wrecks, bodies, burned-out hulks of both sides, but no movement. The war felt far away for the first time, though he knew it wasn't. He dropped back inside and unrolled the map across his knee, tracing their path toward the main line. They were less than 4 miles from friendly positions, maybe less if the roads were still intact, but that distance might as well have been the moon without fuel. Miller broke the silence. "Command ever call back?" Warren shook his head. "Radio's dead." "Maybe that's for the best," Kearns muttered. "Less to explain." No one disagreed. They ate what passed for breakfast, cold rations that cracked instead of bent, washed down with melted snow from the engine hood. The act of eating felt mechanical, an obligation rather than nourishment. Warren listened to the wind shift, catching faint echoes that might have been artillery, or only his imagination. "We'll move by noon," he said finally. "We'll take the ridge and follow it east till we find the main road. If we stay low, they won't see us." Beck rubbed his gloved hands together. "And if they do?" Warren looked at him evenly. "Then we make them regret it." They moved out slow, the Firefly groaning as its treads broke through crusted snow. The repaired section held, though every turn sent vibrations up through the hull. The forest thinned as they climbed, revealing a stretch of open ground that glimmered faintly under the weak sun. Warren scanned it through the periscope. Nothing moved. They crossed one ridge, then another, and just as he began to believe they might make it, the faint thump of distant engines reached his ears. Miller heard it too. "They're behind us," he said quietly. Warren listened, counting the rhythm. Diesel, not gasoline, heavy, steady, close. 2, maybe 3 vehicles, he said. "Tank destroyers or recon. If we move fast, we can stay ahead." Beck pushed the throttle, but the Firefly was old, its engine weary, its treads dragging through frozen soil. The sound behind them grew louder. Warren's mind worked through distances, angles, terrain. "There's a ridge bend ahead," he said. "We'll take cover there, make them think we vanished." Beck nodded, turning the tank sharply, the hull scraping ice. They slid into the curve of the ridge just as the first enemy silhouettes appeared on the horizon. Through the periscope, Warren saw them, Jagdpanzer IVs, low and squat, their guns scanning the snow like predators sniffing blood. They were cautious, slow, advancing in a fan spread. "They don't know where we are yet," Warren whispered. "Hold your fire." The men waited, the tension coiling tighter with every passing second. The enemy drew closer, the growl of their engines vibrating through the ground. Warren could feel the thrum in his bones. He watched the lead tank's barrel swing slightly left, then stop, perfectly aligned with their hiding spot. The realization hit like a blow. "They've got us," he said. "Driver, reverse now." Beck threw the gear, but the Firefly hesitated, its engine choking before it roared to life again. The delay was enough. The first shell struck the ridge above them, showering dirt and rock onto the hull. "Return fire," Warren shouted. Miller pivoted the turret, aiming blind through smoke and snow, and fired. The recoil jolted them hard, and through the clearing haze Warren saw their shot strike the second enemy tank dead center, blowing it apart in a flash of orange. "Reload," he barked. Kearns slammed another round in, hands shaking. Another enemy shell whistled past, grazing their side armor, leaving a smoking scar. "They're flanking," Miller said, breathless. "No time," Warren replied. "Rotate right, aim low." The turret groaned as it turned, the hydraulics struggling against the cold. The next shot fired, hitting the lead tank's tread. It lurched sideways, immobilized but still alive. Warren could hear its gun charging. "Move us forward now," he yelled. Beck floored it, the Firefly lunging ahead as the enemy's shell screamed past where they'd been seconds before. Snow exploded behind them. Warren aimed again, his hands steady despite the chaos. "Miller, target the smoke vent, upper left." The shot landed true. The German tank ignited, flames licking upward, the blast echoing through the valley. The last enemy vehicle fired once more before retreating, its shot glancing off their rear armor. Warren let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Status?" he asked. "Treads cracked again," Beck said. "Turrets jammed," Miller added. We can't rotate more than 20 degrees. Doesn't matter, Warren said. We're still moving. He knew they couldn't fight another round. The tank was battered, bleeding oil and smoke. They limped eastward, the battle receding behind them. The radio hissed suddenly, faint but alive again. A voice came through. Barely audible. Unidentified armor, this is Allied Command Post Gamma. Identify or be fired upon. Beck looked at Warren, eyes wide. They've got us in their sights. Warren grabbed the transmitter. This is Firefly 2, 8th Armored. We're friendly. Repeat, friendly. There was a pause, static filling the line. Then came the reply. Confirmed. Hold position. Recovery unit en route. The relief that followed was so sharp it almost hurt. Miller leaned back against the wall, exhaling in disbelief. We made it. Warren didn't answer right away. He looked through the periscope one last time, at the horizon streaked with smoke and snow, the wrecks of both sides scattered like forgotten graves. For now, he said quietly. They reached the Allied lines just before dusk. Soldiers guided them in, their faces lit by the orange glow of burning fields. Medics rushed forward, mechanics trailing behind. Warren climbed out slowly, boots hitting the ground with a heaviness that had nothing to do with fatigue. The air smelled of smoke, oil, and victory turned sour. A captain approached, clipboard in hand. Sergeant Warren? Warren nodded. You're to report to command for debrief immediately. The man's tone was formal, clipped. Warren could see in his eyes the unspoken question. What rule had you broken this time? He saluted, a motion automatic after years of practice, and walked past him without a word. Behind him, the Firefly idled weakly, its hull blackened, its nameplate buried under soot. Beck called after him softly. What'll you tell them, Sarge? Warren paused but didn't turn. The truth, he said. Even if they don't believe it. He walked toward the tent where light flickered against canvas, each step leaving deep prints in the snow that would be gone by morning. Above, the sky cleared for the first time in days, stars sharp and cold over a world still burning. Warren looked up once, the frost stinging his eyes, and thought of how thin the line had been between life and memory. The wind carried the faint sound of the engine's dying hum behind him, steady, resolute, and human to the last.